the taller I become, the farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. And that my pride was gone. Oh, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho. Your lies will come tumbling. Deny my place.
President of Lingere Post is here, Nubian Queen.
That's mine. The light will shine so brightly it will blind you. Because there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. Because that my pride was gone. Something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough, but we know better. Just look them in the eyes and say, gonna do it anyway. Gonna do it anyway. Gonna do it anyway. Gonna do it anyway. Something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. But you're doing me wrong so much. But that my pride was gone. Oh no. Something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. But you're doing me wrong so much. But that my pride was gone. Oh no. Something inside so strong. Something inside so strong.
Okay, thank you so much. Like we always say, good afternoon, good evening, and of course, good morning, wherever you are around the world and watching us here at Lingere Post. I'm your host, Mama Lingere Sad. And of course, on the panel today, I have with me my co-host, Fatou Baji, and our guest, Mustafa K. Dabo, one of the journalists or the lead journalist at Malagan. You have all seen stories from Malagan, especially in investigative journalism. He's also, of course, an award-winning journalist. We will be talking to Mustafa today, not just using the Bob Keita case as a case study, but looking wider at the implications of what you would call the criminal justice system in the country or the justice system in the country. So that is our conversation today. This is, of course, a series of workshops or discussions that we will be having around some of the very difficult questions and discussions that we're having socially at the moment. And hopefully, again, we will be adding value to the discussion and also learning from some of the subject matter experts like Mustafa, especially in terms of investigative journalism, etc. So we thank you for joining us. Welcome. Of course, ñu ngi leen a nuyu yéen ñëpp foo leen munti di nekk rek di ñu seetaan di leen wax jërëjëf si li nga xam ne mooy seen seetaan ak ànd ak bi ngeen a ànd ak ñun fii si Linguère Post man la seen host Mama Linguère Sarr ma ànd tey ak suma co-host di Fatou Badji ñu ànd ak suñ gan di Moustapha Keita Dabo tey nag lu ñoo waxtaana mooy li nga xam ne mooy suñ justice si réew mi ñu jël nag case study bi nga xam ne moom la ñëpp di waxantoo fi mu nekk nii mooy case bi nga xam ne mooy rape case yi Bob ki nga xam ne mooy Bob Keita ñu use dinañ am yeneen gan yoo xam ne itamit dina ñëw muy ku mel ni lawyer Sadio Barrow ak ki nga xam ne mooy Madi Jobaate ñoom itamit si kanam tuuti rek dinañ dugga bokk si waxtaan bi comme niñ ko dee waxee rek ñun ñëpp ñu waxtaan parce que ñu ne suñu waxtaanee rek fa naa dinañ juboo réeroo amut waxtaan moo xëj na mooy ñàkk rek suñu fekkee ne waxtaan nañ rek dinañ mën a juboo xëj na kon mbaɗin la muy laal be mba bel kontonnaal ɓe dawoɗa dorong mbal kontonna jang Linguère Post mba falale ko ntelo malla host Mama Linguère Sarr bi ninna ko host Fatou Badji tolle bi jang ɓe min kaccala wolo miyalon ko ye tumo min landi iɓe min kumandi kam Bob Keita bari mbe kacca fango fandilale ka samba fanna miyalon ko wolom na justice system ti pour ka jibe mbebe kafulano nyonka nyaadi le pour ka jibe ko justice system yettama nyantatama la nyamin nganna luntango soto bi minyo Mustafa Keita Boti nali Mustafa Keita Bolong ate mu journalist leti dulami yalon ko ka kumandi malagen ate fana mu momi yalon ko ya iba mbafula nyaadi ye award jama diala pour ala do ko mi yalon ka ke journalism la koto wala na bin ko nganati parce que fanan li olof yi di wax xam-xamam màcc na bu bari si yu bari machallah kon ñu indi ko baax na ñuy recognize tamit suñ nit ñi nga xam ne wax dëgg neex yàlla machallah si li ñuy def mun nañ ko te itamit am nañ ci xam-xam kon bi mbe wole kacakanto jambi mbal be kontonnal be dawoda dorong bitung nga dun kacato nganna sista bula mi mu Fatou Badji ati fana yal kontong isajen na luntango fana yal kontong sena kacanyinda yele.
Thank you very much, Mama. Malam ko ila manika ko seneyata nun tenne. Really clear. Good evening, viewers, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Linguère Post. I am Fatou Badji, and it is an honor today to be joining the same platform with my sister Mama and, of course, Mustafa and the rest of the guests that we would be welcoming in a few minutes. So really, like Mama said, today we're looking at the justice delivery system in the Gambia and really taking the Bob Keita case as a case study, but really widening the scope of the discussion to really look at some of the lessons that we can draw from this case and looking at probably some potential recommendations from legal experts, human rights defendants, and some journalists like Mustafa. So mbadingol ngal be kontong ngamira Mama ya summarize le really nicely in Mandinka mbe Michael pass on la dorong to Mustafa prate konton diro ke saje dorong dunno kacha kono. Thank you. You are on mute, Mustafa.
You're mute.
Okay. All right. I'm just have to say that I am glad to be part of the conversation and to contribute to whatever it is that I have in mind about our criminal justice system, about cases we may have covered in the past at Malaga. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. And we will start, Mustafa, by first just talking widely about how do you see or what are your impressions of the coverage of the case that we are maybe going to use as a case study today, which is the Bob case. From a journalism point of view, what are some of the observations that you have observed in terms of the coverage of that trial? and maybe what lessons can we draw from that before we move into the other questions?
I think that, you know, from the beginning of the case, this has become a very a case that I wouldn't call it a toxic case, but it's become a case that um, has been dragged through the mud such that the conversation no longer becomes about the issue of rape and allegation of rape. Instead, it becomes about a portrayal of a society that has lost clarity of what justice is or what the criminal justice system is supposed to be about, or a sense of innocence until proven guilty or otherwise, or guilty, or the victims also right to a fair trial or hearing of a case, whatever you have, such that the lines, thin lines, have been crossed, you know, all along. And I must say, along the line, the media was dragged along the way, and such that the coverage became, uh, it became, you know, because the media coverage in the Gambia is still very, it's at a subliminal level. It's at a very, except in few instances, investigative journalism is not very thoroughly done. In a large number of cases, it's about the reporting of an opinion. And quite a number of the time, the kind of platform, the kind of people who are giving platform to have come to carry certain kind of an extreme view on issues that do not come to provide clarity. Instead, they come to muddy the waters instead. So, for example, look at the choice of uh, experts media relies on to report on the Bob Keita case. You would realize that this is because one of the basic, most fundamental things in journalism is it's proper sourcing. Who is your source? What kind of expert do you get information from? What person, what interest does such a person have in the subject matter you're trying to report? And if you look at it from that perspective, um, either interviewing people who may have faced allegations of rape before, or people who may have a certain um, a certain history of certain kind of conduct that are probably, excuse my, I'm trying to be too careful. you know, so in other words, the media did not contribute to the clarity. The media contributes to the confusion and the toxicity of the case. I mean, that's what happened, because otherwise, from the beginning, my position has been that I do not necessarily think, and maybe anyone can differ on this point, that people shouldn't be granted bail when they are accused of rape. I think anyone should be granted bail with strict conditions so that they cannot fled the jurisdiction. In other countries, that can happen. You can have a bail, and your papers can be papers can be confiscated. Anything can happen so that you don't escape bail, right? But I do not also think that it's inconceivable that someone faces a grave crime and you say that person must be free. That's ridiculous. In a society where there is no justice, no one is safe anyway. So, but the media does not provide a platform where conversation relating to a clarity of thought about what this matter is about. Like, there was a girl who said someone was raped. That is an allegation, and that's clear. We take that and put that on the table. There is a young man who is in mile two, and people said, well, and he deserves to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's another matter altogether. We put that on the table. But then, if that thin line between these two, you are saying up is does not have the right to make the allegation and be accorded the dignity of a state investigation and prosecution accordingly. You're not interested in justice. If you take the other side also to the extreme view, whereas Bob is guilty as charged, then you're not interested in justice, because justice is supposed to be uh, we're supposed to only invest in that in the and allow the investigation to be thoroughly done but from the beginning the media did not contribute to that. The media just went ahead. People who said no, Bob should be freed because he was in mine too for a long time. That's not the fault. That's not anyone's fault. That's the fault of the law. You certainly don't know what you have problems with. What you have problem with is the act. So you advocate for the act to be reviewed. That this act is saying people who are charged should be kept in prison until they can be proven innocent, and that is injustice. Okay, I agree with you if that's what your question is, but that doesn't necessarily mean he should be free. What you actually mean is that we should review the act. The criminal justice system is not treating him fairly, and that then the police investigation. Nobody sat down to thoroughly blame the police to say, well, this particular case happened. And we were all here. Initially, there were claims that some political leaders went into the lady's house and they had wanted the case to be out of court. Those allegations were out in the public space.
Mm-hmm.
And at
With
that material,
at the victim's home.
exactly, those allegations were out in the public space. And if you had listened to that carefully, you would have seen that at that material time, the understanding of a greater number of people on the other side, I mean, people who had interest in justice, was that this is not normal. They should allow the justice to take its course. So there was an interference at the beginning. And I think what that interference did, many people thought, well, when the case was brought back, the interference didn't cause a lot of problem. But it did. If you had seen this case, you see, when a number of cases I have looked at, I said I am sorry, Malagan had looked at, a number of, whether it's me or any of our team members have looked at, what we see is that there are interferences in police investigations. And usually what that does is that it rigs the case. You see, the prosecutor is as good as the case file that is handed to him or her. When that case file is poorly done, the investigation is poorly done, that case it will collapse. So if the police want a case to collapse, that's the easiest way to make it. They just do a bad job, and it will collapse. So if you had looked at it, why do we are having a rape case? We said someone forced himself on a girl, right? That was the beginning of the case. It was not just a statutory rape. The allegation at the time was a rape. It was a rape, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, when they took those rape cases to court, it turns out when the prosecutors became serious with it, they realized that we don't have enough in the files. And they don't have enough in the files. So they were, trying to make best use of what they have. And that's where, in the end, they had to settle. This is my opinion, but I think this is what makes more sense to me. And in the end, they said, well, we have to, let's prove if Bob is the father, right? And if Bob is the father, then automatically we have proven statutory rape, because we only have to prove that the child at the time of conception was a minor, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have, if this case was thoroughly investigated, we wouldn't just have settled for that, you see. So in this particular case, if, for example, Bob turns out to not be the father, what happens? The case collapses. But that doesn't necessarily also mean that and that that they didn't have sex, right? It doesn't mean that. But so that tells you how, the nature of the case and how the case comes to be. But the thing, so that I don't lose focus, the thing is that the media didn't play a role, a good role, in providing that clarity, so that people understand that everybody in the society, whether it's Buba or Zainab or Mama or Muhammad, everybody in society deserves dignity. And as to accord them that dignity, they must, and it's not negotiable, they must be treated with dignity. They must be treated with fairness. They must be protected. Because the money that pays Barrow, and each of these individuals have a share in that money. And each of these individuals, Barrow owe it to them, and the state and the republic owes it to them to accord them fair hearing in any of the cases. So that means justice for all of them. So that media didn't provide that clarity. They allowed people of different interest groups to come in and confuse everybody, such that people go to TikTok and you have someone say, it's Idrissa Fati Mbai. It's not even Fati Mbai. If you said Idrissa Fati Mbai, then you do not know what you're talking about. But the person clearly didn't know what he was talking about. He was talking anyway, right? So a lot of people came in who are lost. They don't know, and people became vulnerable to want of a better expression, false prophets, people who came and claimed huge understanding of the case. I'm a lawyer, I understand this and this, and they embodied the thing, and they became heroes. And all of a sudden, everybody became confused, and now we are here. People are on the streets now, and they are protesting, and they say justice. So all others know is that Buba has been in mile 2 for 2 years, which, if you tell anybody, if you have been in mile 2 for 2 years, clearly that's unfair. Yeah, but they have not explained this is the reason, and this is the law why he is there, and this is the reason why he is there, and saying up and all that. And some people also brought the TikTok video of Zainab, and which is an isolated matter. You see, because Zainab runs a TikTok, and I may not agree with what she does. I'm a very private person. I wouldn't do that. But but that's Zainab's life. So if that's to
And that's
provide
where she
clarity for the
promotes
people.
her business. Mhm.
Exactly. So that's a private matter that you would, a media report would separate from, because we owe it also to the people to provide clarity for the people, and to provide clarity is to give an uncolored fact to the people and let them decide this is what we want to believe. You see, so I think it's a tragedy. I mean, our situation is tragic.
That brings me to a very important point that you made. The media, of course, was not helpful in providing the clarity that was needed. But one of the things that we saw was also what we would call, I don't know whether it's join the list or even if you can, but TikTok journalists, Facebook journalists, social media journalists, people who, as you say, are not privy to anything to do with this case, but all of a sudden had, you know, analysis and stuff to say about this case that really confused a lot of people. And you spoke about this because somebody called me a few days ago, and she said actually that somebody was speaking about this case, and what they were telling her was that they saw a video of Sainabu dancing after this child had died. So the for him, the person was upset, not because of whatever was going on, because he could not understand how could Sainabu be dancing,
Celebrating.
celebrating.
It would come across like that.
Yes. So for him it was like, then she did do this, or she did harm this child, because here she is celebrating. But those videos, as we all know, are old videos, but they have been brought into the narrative to kind of push a certain discussion or a certain position. And it is unfortunate. It's the same with a picture of her and a very private gentleman that they also put online, claiming that was her going to Turkey. Again, that this did not help the situation. And none of us, or none of, like you said, the media coverage around it did not bring any clarity in all of those issues. And it further fueled anger towards a certain person, which is very unfortunate. We have lawyer Sergio Barrow joining us from the US. Welcome, Sergio. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, Sergio.
Sergio is mute.
Sergio, you're mute.
Hello. Good afternoon. I think, yeah. Good afternoon over there.
Good afternoon, Sergio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And then if my internet is acting up, please let me know if I'm breaking out or whatnot.
Yes, thank you.
It's been known to happen. And
Yes.
then thank you. And then, guys, sorry about the late meeting. I had some other prior engagements.
Yeah, we were told that you'll be joining us a bit later.
Yeah.
Sergio, you're mute. No,
Mama, can I just follow up on Mustafa's point around reporting? Just a follow-up question there. Mustafa, you mentioned so many different things, really important areas in terms of bail, interference of the public into this case, but you also talked about not just the complexity, but also the sensitivity of this case and how media personnel should be sensitive in terms of reporting. But I also think that the police also were not that sensitive when it comes to reporting this case. And I just wanted to understand your thoughts around how the police dealt with the press release that was shared online, naming the victim, not just her name, but also her address. What do you have to say about that? Because it's not just the journalist, it's also, like I said, the police. When we saw the report, the press release, it stated the name of the victim, where she lived, and personally, I felt that that was exposing the victim to danger. So, what are your thoughts around that? How the police manage that sensitive information?
You see, I think that we are facing prospects of a system that is heading to collapse, right? It's not just our criminal justice system, but it's also the interference into our criminal justice system. And I want to tie it to a recent case that we've done. So as recent as 2020, around June or thereabout, some bunch of boys, teenage, very small boys, between 11 to 15, were being held at a particular orphanage. And it turns out the older ones were abusing the younger ones, and they were in horrible conditions. They are taking money in the name of those orphanages. And if you go to Malagan website, you can read the story. When that case broke, the police, they went there. They couldn't even have the vehicle. It was the young man who was recording to expose that case, who had to pay for the movement of the police to do that case from one place to another. So when the police came, that orphanage was running 12 orphanages across the country. There was an allegation at one at Kerseri. When they came, they picked the boys who were named to have been abused and the ones who were named to have abused them. And they took them to Bakote. The rest of the kids, they discharged them. They said, go home. The rest of the children in other orphanages, they told them, go home. That was a crime scene. They didn't talk to anybody in the neighborhood. I know this because I investigated it later. And the story is on our website. The people who recorded every incident relating to that matter, They didn't interview him. The lady who was, I mean, some Badibunka old woman who was near that neighborhood, was feeding those children. I mean, to our credit, Badibunkas are usually very generous people. I mean, but they didn't talk to the lady. They didn't do anything, like they didn't do anything thorough. And the two batch of children, the abusers and the abused, they took them to some social welfare department home in Bakote. And they put them in the same house. The boys who were raped and the boys who raped, they put them in the same apartment. Not necessarily the same house, but in the same apartment. They were seeing each other. In fact, one of them told me, one of them made, in fact, an attempt to rape them again. You see, they only did a medical test which confirmed some bruises in the anus of the boys who were raped, allegedly raped at the time. And then that's it. They went and write some report, some 20-page, I think, report, and said, yes, the doctor confirmed that there were confirmed bruises in the anus of. No story around how it happened. Like, how do you do that? You dispatch, you don't talk to anybody in the neighborhood about the condition of children, how often they see them outside. Those children were begging in that neighborhood. They didn't investigate the people who operated the orphanage, their stories, what sort of businesses they own in this country, the money that was coming for children, how do they spend those monies, and on what? They do nothing. So the police investigation of a rape case, whether it's a man or a woman or a boy or a girl, in this country, as far as I know, is like any other investigation. And any other police investigation we have looked at, whether it's the passport scandal or the so-called investors who came or the Dr. Banja case, all of it is done in a way that collapses right on its belly. Yeah, and that's the same thing they do. We've had rape cases here where some number of girls came together and make an allegation. And it turns out some of them, from what they said, when they visit the police, they will find the person they accused of rape talking to the police. You see, so those are things that there is no oversight and there is no proper accountability, and there is also no synergy between the prosecutors and the police. So, for example, the prosecutors at the Justice Ministry, they have a whole different understanding of what's the burden of proof in this particular case, as opposed to this particular case, what kind of evidences do we need, how do we protect the integrity of those evidences, and things like that. But at the time police are doing this movement, helter-skelter, the Justice Department is not aware. They only go, do whatever it is they do, they put together the file, then they say legal advice. That's not ideal. The prosecutor should be aware of the time you are doing that work so that he guides the process as well. You see what I mean? And that's a very big issue in our system. Some of the police are not trained as lawyers. They don't know how to, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm not giving them an excuse. I'm not a lawyer either. But, there is so much also one's capacity can be. You can't know everything the prosecutors at the Justice Department know or what they are thinking. So they need to be also in the loop so that cases can be thoroughly investigated and thoroughly done. And from the look of things, the police don't. In fact, there are allegations here that in some cases when they take a rape allegation to police, they tell them, remember diary. I mean, I haven't had any evidence of this, but people say it, and if God say it, how do I not believe them? I mean, so that's it. So I think we will have to look at holistically our justice system, issues of rape and things like that, especially investigations of it, the capacity of our police, equip them, give them more resources, more training to be able to do this kind of things. Not the kind of workshops we keep doing here. Because those things you just workshop, and you give people transport before.
Yeah.
That's what we've been doing from independence, but it doesn't change anything. Yeah, I think that's the.
Thank you. Sajo is here. And Sajo, I would just, from a follow up of what Mustafa is saying, we have seen in other countries actually lawyers being recruited into the police. For example, here in Sweden, you have lawyers actually in the police who help with investigations and preparing case files, etc. We have a whole heap of lawyers that we graduate from the University of the Gambia. So there's resources already. Isn't it time for the police department to look at this resource that we have in the country, which are the law graduates, and try to see how they can come up with a special remuneration package if needed to recruit them into the police so that they become the ones that are doing some of these investigations? I think it will only make the work of the police better, both in terms of investigations and evidence gathering, etc. What are your thoughts, Sajo?
Thank you, Mama. I mean, in a perfect world, that's ideal. And then the fact that if young lawyers graduating from the Gambia apply to be police officers, not only when they are trained as police officers in terms of police training, would it help them understanding the law? But notwithstanding, from my opinion, I don't think the problem is police officers or individual recruited to be police officers without law background is what is botching most of these investigations. I mean, okay. Am I breaking out?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're breaking, Sajo.
Can you disable the video? Maybe that could.
Right, let me just
Yeah,
let me see if I could just
you're
resign and I'll
loud
try
and clear
something else.
now.
Okay. Thank you.
You can be heard, but you
I'm loud
cannot
and
be
Mm-hmm.
clear.
seen. Maybe you.
We can't see
Yeah,
you,
keep
but
it that way.
Okay, thank you. What I am saying is, from my opinion, I don't think the problem is police not recruiting young graduates who are trained as lawyers, because police investigation is not the same thing as lawyer work. And then, although it may be helpful and beneficial for a police officer to have a background in law, it doesn't necessarily translate or means that a police officer without law background would not be effective. I think the problem, what we are having, as Mr. Davo alluded earlier, is we are not syncing police investigation with the Ministry of Justice. Now, take the US for an example. Every prosecutors, in addition to having investigators within the prosecutor's office, would always work with the law enforcement police. For instance, when a crime is reported and police started investigation, the first thing they would do, if that police department does not have an embedded, know that, hey, we started an investigation on this particular case. From the word go, police would work with the prosecutor's office regarding the manner of investigation, because they wanted to make sure the evidence collected and authentic, they could use it. And then the steps that they should follow, if they should request a search warrant, if police are interested in DNA or other biological evidence, and then the prosecutors think that would be helpful, they will guide them. That's how it works. And then from the starting, that sync should be there, because lawyers are not investigators. Even though we are trained in factual investigation, we don't necessarily have the same training as police officers. And police officers, the training they have might not be law. So they have to work together from the start if you want a case to develop. Because every prosecutor, I can tell you, you get assigned to police department whenever a case is building up, especially a case of serious magnitude. They would always contact the prosecutor's office to make sure they don't blow that case, or something doesn't come out later that would make the office of the prosecutor look bad, or even the police department look bad. So I think in Gambia, the issue we are having, we inherited this system from the British where police can investigate, and then police too has the authority to prosecute cases in court, and then they could also prosecute. In my opinion, what we should have done if we revise our laws and then procedures, police officers should be strictly limited to investigation. If police officers want to prosecute, they can certainly join the Ministry of Justice. We have over 10% of our FBIs who are actually Juris Doctor. They are lawyers. A lot of lawyers get recruited to become FBI agents. That doesn't translate that they are going to try cases in court, but it kind of help them. It helped their investigation part in terms of knowing the law, what they can do, their boundaries, and then police could certainly do the same thing. They can recruit accountants, they can recruit lawyers, they can recruit engineers because they have a lot of different facets of police investigation, and people with different background would help them in terms of their investigation. If they are doing forensic accounting investigating, it would be helpful to have a police officer who has a background in accounting. If you're doing a case of a serious magnitude, a murder, and then a police officer who is trained in law would at least know, some of the counters of law in terms of evidence collection. Notwithstanding, they still have to defer to the prosecution office in terms of when to execute a search, whether you can execute a search without a warrant and then not blow back, or whether it would be prudent to actually seek a search warrant before you do anything. I think that's investigation, and then in that case, they will build cases up to avoid any issues.
Yes. And at the moment, I think a lot of what we're saying here, a lot of cases that come before the courts, especially when it gets to the AG's chambers or something, is that we're seeing a lot of cases where people are faulting the way or the scope of the investigation. If, for example, there's a rape case and you're not interviewing the neighbors, like Mustafa has said, if there's a rape case and you don't get a search warrant to go in and check because somebody's telling you that, somebody's actually threatening me with pictures, etc., and you're not getting a search warrant to get their phone or their computer to be able to search it, then what kind of investigation are you presenting to be able to actually have a case that is solid enough to be prosecuted? So is that deliberate or is it a lack of capacity?
It would be difficult without knowing, because if Gambia is known for anything, is the difficulty in obtaining information or even understanding how our process is. And then now, my conversation with people who are actually barred in Gambia and then protest there in front of court, appeared in court,
Mhm.
made me understood that even in Gambia, like unlike here, police or even prosecutors could use evidence that are illegally obtained. So if this is true, you know, then there is no incentive for police to, follow process. If you could obtain evidence illegally and then still have it admissible in court, then there is no deterrent effect. There is no incentives for police to do the things right. So you could start a process without the right, evidence or investigation, and then build your cases. The other flaw we have that we inherited as part of our criminal code, I understand that there is, an amendment in process trying to revise it, but the criminal procedure we have is from 1933, before the Gambia even became a state, and then that's what we are working with. And then under those procedures, just like how it was in England before they changed a lot of their laws in 94, police can arrest you on a reasonable suspicion. While they arrest you, and then this is common in Gambia, we have seen this, they would quote unquote let you out on police bill without, violating that 72-hour clock, or even charge you in front of the court, but at least still release you on court bail while the police continue to investigate. And then this is perfectly legal in Gambia. It would have been prudent. We would have liked police to at least do the investigation before you actually accuse someone of crime, because at least liberty is not the main problem. Our laws actually empower these people to do certain things. And then I think the conversation has focused. It is a good thing, especially this ongoing trial. It is a good thing, especially this ongoing trial. that has, exposed a lot of flaws in our justice system. Some of the laws that we think, may be adequate might not be. At least to start a conversation, energize the citizens to see where can we better address this concern to, which is again the National Assembly to address most of these issues. I think the problem is with how things are done, and then there is no, appetite for change as it stands right now.
There's I've been talking to a lawyer or somebody that is also in the legal profession, and one thing they told me is that statements can be obtained from people without the presence of lawyers. That is one. And that two, the police do not give case files to lawyers or give them their evidence file. For example, even the statements from the victim or the witnesses until they get to court and ask for it and get a warrant or something for the police to provide that. Now, how can a lawyer defend their client if at the beginning of the case, when it's being called in front of a judge, they're not fully briefed about what their clients have even said to the police?
Well, if that is the system we have, it's a little bit unfortunate. And then again, looking at our criminal procedure code, which govern or should govern most of these things, is not explicitly clear regarding discovery. Now, what I know for a fact, Gambia discovery, if you want to call it that way, formal discovery, normally starts once charges are filed in court, and then at the what they call the plea hearing, the system of plea hearing. Usually, when the prosecutor present their case file, and then as part of what witness list or evidence they are going to file with court, that's the time they would advise the court about such evidence they have, and then at such point, defense is entitled a copy of the case file. Now, unlike the Gambia, if it is here, like where our criminal procedure code is very, very detailed. Once you get arrested, if I walk into a police station and then a client of mine is arrested or charged, the moment I arrive there, the first thing I'm asking is, what are the charges? And then if at the time they had already interviewed my client, let's say he voluntarily decided to speak to them, and then they have already interviewed other parties. A classic example would be, let's say, a domestic violence call. Husband and wife at home, one party called the police, and then that a fight broke out or there's a disturbance. Police arrived, separate the two, interview the wife, interview the husband. If there are, children in the house, adult, interview them or neighbors that are close, ask them what happened. At the end of their initial, informal investigation, police determined that, look, we believe that husband is the culprit here, is the one who actually attacked the wife because wife has some injuries or vice versa. And then they arrest the husband, bring him to the police station. They would prepare, in New York, what they call the DD5, the police statements. And then they would prepare that report, what happened when they arrived, which officers arrived, how they respond, what they hear. Everything would be detailed. Because remember, it's from this police report that the police officer would swear an affidavit in order to get a arrest warrant or give it to the magistrate. It internalized their thought process. So the moment I arrived at the police station, let's say 2 hours later I arrived there, and then they have prepared these things. They would just say the police reports are not admissible in court. They would just say the police reports are not admissible in court. I don't have the legal reason why not, but at least I know what my client said or did not say. I know what the witness has alleged because those informations are important later in terms of preliminary hearing or if you want to impeach the witness. But you get access to that. They don't even store it. So again, like I said, I think in revising our criminal procedures, these things should be expressively stated on it, and then our legislators has to be intentional in letting police know once you arrest people, even without a formal complaint being filed, if a statement is given, and then either the accused or even their representative, when they ask for those documents, it should and must be given to them immediately. There should be no questions about that.
Mama, can we move back to a little bit to the bail issue? I think both Sajo and Mustafa both touched on that on the bail issue and said, if I hear you both well, that you think that alleged perpetrators probably need to be bailed while investigation is still going on by police. So in a rape case, as a DV advocate, I would be really worried to allow an alleged perpetrator to walk free, carry on their own businesses, while the police carry on their investigation. Because really, my concern would be how many more victims would they have along the way. So are you saying that all alleged perpetrators, until tangible evidences have been gathered, whilst the police are doing investigation, they should be allowed bail? Because I think that has been a topic of discussion, especially in this Bob Keita case, that there has not been enough evidence, and so he should be allowed a bail until the police have enough evidence against him. For me, like I said, if, for example, that alleged perpetrator happens to be in reality a real criminal, how many victims would be at risk? So what exactly are you saying? Can we clarify that?
Yeah, especially when it comes to pedophiles, because we have cases like that when we've also dealt with pedophiles, people who have molested children within their community. So what is the balancing act? Or should it be at the discretion of the judge, maybe?
Is that for me?
Yes. And Sadia, after you.
Both, yeah.
So actually, I think that we should have. I mean, everybody deserves justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And justice. I mean, if we want justice, we must be able to have patience to ensure that everybody has fair trial. Because you see, there is a reason why if you go to a lawyer and say, you defend this guy, he's a horrible guy. He was charged for genocide, crimes against humanity. And in their defense, they would say, well, it's also justice to be on our side. I mean, if no one advocates on his side, how do we then establish justice? How do we reach justice? How do we interrogate the facts if nobody is on the other side of the divide? So I think justice is when every side is adequately served and every shred of evidence is interrogated, and then the blame or the culpability is apportioned accordingly. So while we did not get to the end result, I do not think it's fair to punish anybody beforehand. That is putting the cart before the horse, So that is the reason why I think I understand. I mean, it's the kind of cynicism one grows when you grow up within a system that is dysfunctional and for a long time. Because people can't really go home and allowed to go home if there is a good criminal justice system that ensures the safety of the victim as much as it does the perpetrator, but also ensure the integrity of the evidence collection process and the evidence that is collected. If the system works, all of this should be able to be, we should take care of all of these things. Because I mean, know it or not, people are stealing from people. I mean, people are stealing from government. And they are murderers too. I mean, they take money that is supposed to be invested in Medicare. I mean, and kills people. I mean, so we can't just go about arresting people and put them in mind too and say, well, we can wait until you are proven innocent. It doesn't work like that. It's proven. We can only say we can wait until you are proven guilty. Then we take you to mile two. But taking you to mile two and wait until you are proven innocent, I don't think that that's not a good practice, really.
But then, Mustafa, how does the police then protect a victim who lives with an alleged perpetrator in the same compound? Like when we look at
Okay, now that is the
sexual and
first thing. Now,
gender-based violence. Let me just land. When you look at sexual and
yeah.
gender-based violence, oftentimes the victim and the perpetrator lives in the same house. They're not often strangers, on the road. So if you kind of discharge or bail an alleged perpetrator who lives with a victim, how do you protect that victim? So that,
You
that
see,
perpetrator could go back home that same night, repeat the same act over and over again whilst the police are protecting. In the UK, often if they feel that a victim is at risk or the perpetrator is to safeguard the victim, they would often separate the two. So they would separate the alleged perpetrator from the victim, especially in domestic violence cases where they would take a woman to a refuge. So in the Gambia, if you tell me that we're waiting for a bail, or whilst we whilst we investigate and gather evidences, I'm going to allow this perpetrator to come back home and continue on perpetrating on me. Like, how is that justice for the victim as well?
no, okay, two things here. The first thing is that the dignity and the protection of the victim is a duty on the state. First thing, right? If the state, if the person we are talking about is a minor, that person's protection, safety, and 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 sanctuary and a place where the person is going to stay can be will be on the Department of Social Welfare. They have some building in Backwater where it's kind of a safe house. Now, if you are talking about the perpetrator and the perpetrator can be in himself in danger, that person can also be protected. And there are ways you can protect either of these people and separate them without exposing the victim to a repeated rape or rape again or something like that. You understand? Now, that's very much possible. If the system works, I mean, all these things we are having is because the system is not working. So if the system works, we should be able to protect and live in a civilized society where, I mean, justice would be applied accordingly. No one will have to be presumed guilty until you are proven innocent. That's to put the thing the other way around. And so for me, I think everybody who is accused of rape, unless in exceptional circumstances, because even laws, I mean, takes care of exceptional circumstances. You say, for example, if you release someone, himself is going to be in danger, his life is going to be in danger. You protect them, right? If you have a witness who is so precious that you think the witness is going to be in danger, you take them to witness protection. No. So there are exceptional circumstances, you deal with them in exceptional way. But in a normal circumstance, I think the criminal justice system, the police, the social welfare department should be able to work out these things. In fact, the silent party in all of these things, since we are talking about an alleged rape of a minor, is the Department of Children and Social Welfare Department. Like, you don't see them. Like, even the child who died in the vehicle, like, the Department of Social Welfare should be all over that. In fact, in our case, the last story we've done in the Penny Appeal case, I mean, they came out and they said, in fact, there was no case. Yeah, they said there was no case, but there was a case. Until we reported and they bring back the case, they said there was no case. The Minister of Children had the guts to say that on newspaper. So that's the kind of a criminal justice we have, and so it's not working. If it's working, we do not have to be. If it's working, we do not have to be in a situation as we are in. But really, we shouldn't be so desperate such to a point that we negate good practices and because the person you think you have so much confidence is guilty could actually be innocent. There are instances when also people face allegations of sexual violence that may not necessarily be true. May be true, may not be true, but What's important is that every person deserves a fair hearing, and that goes for not just the perpetrator but also the victim. You see, and I can understand. I mean, at the intense, when the emotion are at the intense level, and some of the people who are talking actually also had gone through abuse. And if you've gone through abuse, then you will see an abuse happening. It reminds you of abuse. And I mean, you don't have to be an angel. It gets on your nerves. That's only human. I can understand when I see emotions. I wrote about this on Facebook about my personal experiences and things I've gone through, and my friends who have gone through similar experiences and sentiments they tend to have when you mention issues of sexual violence and things like that. I mean, so you see that, but we must also be able to take the emotions out of it, because that's why we got to where we got to. I mean, once it's a failed system, but the other thing is also because we need to exercise a little bit of patience, difficult as it is.
Yeah. We spoke about a couple of, I think maybe if Sajo can come in on the bail issue. We've seen the case in the US. We've seen R. Kelly, we've seen Bill Cosby, we've seen, what's his name, Epstein, the one that died in prison. All
Yes,
of
yes,
them.
the US.
Yeah. Sajo, so what does that, how does that apply in terms of bail?
Uh, well, first thing Mr. Davos' point, personally, I think no court, no lawsuit foist on a victim to go on some kind of witness protection because you allege a crime. I think that's just nuts. And then what I think, in as much as I'm a black man in the United States, I believe in the presumption of innocence. And then in Gambia, I remember when 2020 draft constitution was going on. I think it should be a constitutional requirement that there shall be no excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment. Period. Everyone should have the right to bail. You should have the right to apply. Whether it would be given should depend on factors. Now, for someone who has never been convicted of a crime, has never had any prior criminal history, and then get charged with a crime, let's say the crime, it's not a violent crime, to think that that person should not be afforded the opportunity to be released on bail. And then if you can prove those things, the court could also put some condition on your release. That's what I think would be a fair balance. Now, for someone who should not be able to be released on their own record, once their appearance would be secured, and two, they are not a flight risk. That's all we care about. Are they a danger to the community or are they a flight risk? That's what is important. If they are in the community for so long and then they have strong ties, well, we know they should not be a flight risk. Now, having said that, and I have seen that most states in this country, even in federal government, what I think and then what I have proposed, even as part of that CRC, because those are public record, my thinking is in as much as everyone has a right to bail, anyone who gets charged with a serious felony or a violent felony or a crime that is horrendous as rape, and then there are serious physical evidence as part of the initial investigation, there should be a presumption of detention unless the accused could rebut that presumption by a higher standard client convincing evidence. Put that in math, it's like 75%. You could show to the court, neither are you a danger to the public, nor are you a flight risk. And then if you can prove those things, the court could also put some condition on your release. That's what I think would be a fair balance. Now, for cases that Fatu has alluded to in terms of domestic violence, you accuse, just like here in the US, you get arrested for domestic violence, an automatic 72-hour no contact goes into effect. You cannot come back to that home. You, the person who is accused. That 72-hour no contact zone just goes in unless the victims go and then actually ask that he never go back to that home. And prior to the end of that 72 hours, ask that you never go back to that home. And personally, I have a case like this where a young man who was accused of disciplining his child, child endangerment, and then they are saying the discipline went beyond normal discipline, and then police were called. He got arrested. When I arrived, the 72-hour contact order was on, and then the initial bail hearing, I moved to modify that bail condition because he is the breadwinner of the family, live with the wife and other children. And then I asked the court that he should be allowed to go back to the home, because if not, he has to pay for a hotel with his limited income, also pay the rent where his children and then wives are. And then prosecutors were going crazy with that. And then for the judge to have a striking balance in this case, because the victim is not even alleged, because you could say an alleged perpetrator, but the victim is the victim, because something happened. You could visibly see those things. They suffered something. There is a victim. And then in this case, what the judge did, my client can be home as long as the wife is there. Whenever the wife step foot to be out, my client could never be at home with the children alone. So that was at least a little bit win for us, because that would minimize, the expenses he has to handle. So in cases like Gambia, and then the Domestic Violence Act, 2013 in Gambia, asks people, you can have a protective order issued, and then contemplate or even ask for whenever a situation of domestic violence happen, and then arrest is triggered. That 72-hour no contact order must go into effect unless the victim agrees or believes that they are no longer in danger with the perpetrator to come before a court has an opportunity to do their initial first hearing. That's what should happen. And then for a country like Gambia, unlike here, where our community and then our extended family are even more apparent, I don't think it would be an undue hardship to find a place where you would be at that initial place. So I think that would be a better strike. But I strongly believe everyone should have a right to bail. The question is, what crimes are you charged of? And then that presumption could be there to say, look, we are going to detain you because this is a serious crime. Or let's say you get arrested, committing a murder. It's gruesome. And then the physical evidence are very overwhelming. Even here in the US, there are cases where you move for a bill and then they would deny it. And then there are cases where the crimes are very serious and so severe. The court was like, okay, maybe you are someone who is wealthy, but you could accuse a person of murder, but you could accuse a person of murder. But because they have substantial ties in the community, and then the court believe that this person is not going to flee, what they would do instead of remand them in prison, because they have lawyers paying $1,000 an hour would come in with all this evidence at the bail hearing. Usually they end up having 5 million, $6 million as bond, cash bond. So they have the money to buy their freedom to be outside. And then you could have the same scenario, same crime with someone who is poor, with public defender, and then the judge might just remand them in prison, or the judge might ask for 500,000 cash bond, and then they don't have that money to pay. They stay in pre-trial detention unless the case is over. In such situation, what we have here, and then what most lawyers would do, you invoke your right to speedy trial. If the case is a misdemeanor, you must be tried within 6 months, or they go free. If it is a felony, you strive to make so even within a year, the court would give a scheduling order. I think Gambia, we could have a balance there in terms of these issues. But in as much as rape is a heinous crime, anyone who is accused of it, unless there is overwhelming physical evidence where you could have that presumption of detention, and then they have to report that they are no longer a threat to the community or a flight risk, I think it's up to the court now as designed.
Okay. Mustafa,
Yeah.
you spoke about the cases that you've investigated, one of them being the penny appeal issue. We have also seen your investigative work into the fires that killed a lot of miners as well.
Mm.
And in all of these cases, what is clearly lacking, or what we clearly see, is the lack of engagement by the authorities that should be speaking, the social services, the police,
Mhm.
etc. And these cases, all of these cases today are not in front of the courts. We have advocated for cases here, minors being raped. One of them is the last one was a boy who was in Canifing. You can all remember that, 11 years old, who was also raped when he went to play football. And again, the perpetrator still hasn't faced justice.
Mhm.
Now, how do we reconcile this? How do we? What is the problem in our justice system that makes it difficult to prosecute these quite what we would see as very straightforward cases that need at least some sort of attention or at least some sort of lessons to be learned for the future? But we don't see a lot of engagement. We don't see a lot of commitment on even the side of places like, or even statements from, we've seen statements from CPA in this case, but we haven't seen this statement. I don't know if I'm wrong. You can correct me. In the case of the Penny appeal, in the case of the fires that you have that has also killed minors, and all of these things, the rape issue. What exactly is the problem? How do you continue to reconcile that with the work that you're doing? Do you still?
So generally, Mama, the problem, just to say that the CPA, the problem has not been not issuing a statement. I think they've issued a statement in all these two incidences. In fact, in the Penny appeal case, they were a part of the so-called task force that investigated the matter. I have my reservations, but anyway, we move on. The point is, we're growing up in a society that has very little regard for accountability. And if you go to the Malagan website, you will see evidence of that. I mean, since we started, we've done a lot of investigations into public sector corruption, a lot of issues, a lot of violations. But ultimately, these things no one gives regards to. The thing is, the Gambian is not moved by fact. The Gambian is not moved by evidence. The Gambian is moved by sentiments. And that is why the society now is in the hands of people who go around with high-sounding slogans. Look at the opinion shapers of the society. You need no more fact than that. So that's the reality. I mean, accountability in this country, it's 0%. This is a country where someone can just did a huge abuse in one sector, and they move the person and make him and send him to foreign service, or move the person from that ministry to another ministry.
I keep
And that's
saying
the kind.
foreign service is like the dumping ground.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing. So unless the society grows with maturity and with sincerity and honesty to truth, and learn to hold each other to account regarding conduct, then we would graduate from this kind of thing. Because the kind of situation you paint is everywhere. In fact, one of the things that came up when we were working on the Penny appeal case was because the social welfare department couldn't do much, because they felt themselves were part of the problem, because social welfare department did not even have a proper regulatory framework for orphanages. You see, a proper regulatory framework for orphanages is not even there. If you're running an orphanage, so there are orphanages in this country whose existence they are not even aware of. I mean, how does it even happen? The Penny Appeal operate in the Gambia. They did a massive launching here. Amir Khan, a famous boxer, came to open them. They were reportedly operating illegally from 2014 to 2020. How does that happen? Like, is that country a normal country? You have director of Department of Social Welfare. You recently are Minister of Children. And even when you have evidence right before you, you have a minister that tells you there is no evidence. It's like you can't even see the sun. The sun is there. You're the one who is refusing to see it. So that's the reality in this country. I mean, it's the issue of accountability. And until the citizens get up and respect themselves and value their own lives, because in a country where there is no justice, no one is safe. If I can kill someone right now and go and sleep in my house because I am Malagan, I mean, who is safe? I can just decide and kill anyone. You see, in the end, when that happens, people's confidence level becomes broken in the system. And if you want to know that people have actually lost faith in their system and in this government and the administration of justice and everything, read the GBO's own governance perception survey. You will see the perception of people on the executive and on our various sectors of governance. You will understand that really, with regards to, there are exceptions, but public perception of, 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 of our administrations is going down. And that's a national security threat. Like when you cannot do anything, like you look at even police investigation of corruptions, you see that this is not thoroughly done, or this is done so that it collapses. You see, or you go, someone is implicated in corruption, and they just pick the person, like, and appoint him just because I can. So that's this society, and the citizens also are not, because the citizens don't know what is useful or what is not useful for them. The citizens, you can just get a Gambian to go, and you just send them credit, and you get them excited, and they go and protest. They wouldn't even know what they are protesting. You just tell them this is, and you use sentiment to arouse people, or you go to them and tell them religion says this, and then the next minute they are all over the place yelling. So that's the thing. When people don't take their lives seriously, they become vulnerable to those false prophets who are going around with high sounding slogans. And that's what is happening in this country right now. So that's where we are. So it's lack of accountability.
Definitely. That's a huge problem. We want to just look a bit closer to the Bob Keita case. Of course, it's before the courts at the moment, so we don't want to go into the particulars of the case. But again, we want to look at what lessons we can draw from this case. And one of the things or the questions that we want to ask is, um, we've asked the issue of bail here, and that is, but the slow pace of justice, what does that do to cases like, especially high profile cases like this? A lot of people are saying 2 years is too long for a young man to be remanded and still not know his fate, and the case to be adjourned over 30 times or whatever it is, with many excuses from both sides, but especially from the judge as well. What do we learn from this? I mean, and this is not just Bob Keita, it's a systemic problem that affects the prison services. You have seen cases, just last week we were talking about a pedophile who was released and not tried because he's been in prison for over, I think it was 4 years or something, without going to trial. And in the end, they just opened Mile 2 prison and let him go. That pedophile is now in the community. There is so much evidence against him because everybody in the community knows that he's abusing children in that community. But he's been let go because he was just following in Mile 2 without any bail. We have seen young boys, youths of that country, held for a joint that they were smoking or a joint that they were caught with. And again,
Sadly,
they're in prison for
sadly.
how many years? And these are all, and they haven't ever been brought in front of a magistrate to be to even be tried. So yes, Bob's case is one of the cases that we're talking about, but the broader systemic problem of delayed justice. In your opinion, and you can, when you finish, Saja can also answer that question. In your opinion, what does that do to the perceptions of people out there?
So first, I mean, the thing is, I read somewhere that there was an interest. In fact, it must have been the last cabinet meeting. One of the things that they said the interior minister had put before the cabinet is a reform of our prison system. However way that comes out anyway. But the thing is, I mean, we've always been talking about Mile 2 being full quite a number of times. We've talked about remand viewing of Mile 2 being overpopulated, overcrowded, and things like that. That's also because of delayed justice. I mean, there are a number of cases, especially civil cases, that are stuck in this court in the courts for a very long time. So those are stories that you come across. In fact, I had one pastor who was also accused of rape. Is also actually at the remand, has been there for 4 years. And no one is even talking about him. So there are a number of cases. In fact, that's one thing the Bob Keita case has done, is to bring to light this particular issue happening within our justice system, that the delay of criminal trial in the country, it's a problem. I mean, and no one is investing time and resources in this direction. I mean, it's not just rape; it's every other offense. So those are issues, and I think that's one thing. The Probably you may have to invite the Justice Minister and the Interior Minister and probably some other stakeholders in government to tell you what their policies are, what their answers are to some of those questions. But it's a huge, huge, huge problem. It's a huge problem.
Definitely. Sergio, what are your views on this? We have seen at Mile 2, like I said, young boys being kept for years for a joint of marijuana. And we have seen, of course, the Bob Keita case where somebody's been accused of rape and they've been in remand now for over 2 years. Um, the slow pace of justice in Gambia, what does that do to both victims and perceptions of fairness?
Uh, well, legitimacy, everything, if there is no semblance of legitimacy, people lose interest. And then if the citizens do not see our courts or judicial system as legitimate body, their verdicts and then their judgment would not mount to anything they're written on. So the issue of prolonged trial or prolonged detention without even coming to court is just festering. Yes, for me, when I review, especially in terms of the Buckhead specific case, 2 years in Gambia, after from the trials that I have seen, that's not even an outlier. Like 2 years being detention. I'm not saying that that's not a lot. My point is, in terms of what we are seeing in the country, that's not an outlier. But what makes his case unconscionable is the revelation that the judge has adjourned that case for more than 30 times, and then some of the excuses we are hearing, if these things are correct, is just unconscionable. But we keeping, lawyers accountable. Unlike the Gambia, if this were the US, you have judges are reviewed, and then there is a body that's reviewing their performance and then how they are processing their cases. Lawyers are held, by the Office of Lawyers Regulation. They are accountable to some of their action. What happened in Bob's case, if that were in the United States, not only defense counsel, you are at depending on the facts how they come out, but for a judge who would unconscionably, adjourn trial for 30 times, unless everyone is on amnesia, that case would have been taken out of that judge, and then could risk, a severe discipline. And then for the individual, the accused, if your lawyer never protest or invoked your right to speedy trial on that, not only is he looking at ineffective assistance of counsel issues, but that's borderline, bar complaint. You could have issues with that. So it doesn't matter whether your client knows or not. If that person get convicted, you could be 100% sure that any appellate lawyer who touched that file is coming after previous counsel and then the court. That case is coming back for a retrial because there would be a lot of issues that would implicate due process right. And then secondly, too, in lawyers, no, everyone should be, you should always look at your back. I remember, one of my professors would tell me, put it in your wallet to remind you that, you screw up, you might as well put it in an envelope and then mail it yourself. So if lawyers knew their right to earn a living is under constant threat, and then it could be yanked in a second, they would be more effective. And then state to the same time, and then judges too. I think accountability should start with us. We start, like for professionals or professional organizations like medical doctors, lawyers, we should be accountable. There should be a system where strict accountability is given. And then citizens should have a right to file complaint at those offices where if there's any issues with there. If we address those things, this prolonged detention would have stopped. And then secondly, too, the problem with Gambia, you get charged with a crime unless it's a capital offense. You don't have a right to attorney, and then most of these other people they don't have right to lawyers. And then this comes again to how we bifurcate our system. Police officers can investigate; they could prosecute. Now, most of the cases like controlled substances, which we consider consider them as non-violent crime. Someone is smoking a joint, or you cut them with just less than 30 ounces of marijuana. Police officers arrested them. Case stays with the police. Majority of the time, Attorney General Chambers does not even hear or even issue a fiat on those cases. So there is this separation. Police are arresting more people for marijuana, keeping them in detention. They are not maybe following up with their cases or bringing them in court. The Justice Department is not hearing about it because maybe they are more focused on cases that attract national attention. So there is no synchrony between the police and then the ministry, and then these cases fall track. So what end up happening is that if those individuals don't have right attorneys, or they don't have people that support them, or they are not prominent, you end up going back to police actually begging for something when they should bring you to court, whether they have evidence or not. They just forget you over there, and then eventually you would either succumb to what they ask you, or you would do process that are somehow questionable to get those people out. I think that's the process. What we should have done, if every police arrest and investigation get transferred to the Ministry of Justice, and then police do not prosecute those things, at least ministry would know at any given time how many cases do they have pending in the court. And then as they are prosecutors and inherent in their prosecutorial discretion, they would know what cases to dismiss if they think this is just them. Give you made you pay a fine, give them all signature bail, give them community service, a one-time off, and then our laws or National Assembly should look into these issues, address it, and then maybe reform our criminal justice system. Gambia, our sentencing laws are still caught up in 18th century, 19th century system that is not fit for purpose. So I think holistically, we have to take a look as a country and look at our laws, and then see what our values are, what can work, and then make those changes, because we cannot work with laws that was imposed on us by people whose desire and intent was how to subjugate and then control us in the process. If we are using the same thing, that's why we are, these problems are manifesting, because the laws were designed to control and subjugate those subjects. So we are doing the same thing to our people right now. I think that's where we are having all this problem.
And that brings me to my point, because there's actually a legislation before the Parliament, the National Assembly, on changing these sentencing, especially to include community service and all of these things. And yet it's still languishing. Mustafa, I don't know if you know anything about why it's still delayed at the National Assembly.
What is that?
The bill for the criminal justice reform.
Oh, yeah. There are a number of bills, not just one.
Yeah, because I know that there's one that deals with sentencing, and that one is also looking at revamping the sentencing with community service, looking at youth, all of these things. And still, we haven't seen any action on them at the level of the National Assembly as well. Isn't there also, like Sadio was saying, a lack of accountability and just putting these bills and reforms there for anybody looking at them?
Well, things, but things we want move, they do move. Things that are of political interest, they do move. Things that are, in the end, there are no consequences for anything. So if the people who are supposed to move those things, they don't move them, what happens? People will protest for certain sentiment on the street, but nobody goes to protest because someone stole money here, or someone killed someone here recklessly in some situation. I mean, Gambians are moved by sentiment. And facts are not sentiment. They don't have that value. So the Gambians get the country they want. I mean, that's me being frustrated, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. But National Assembly, there are a number of bills there, including the anti-corruption bill. Number of bills actually, and those bills, and they choose which bills to consider during a legislative period and which bills not to consider. So it's deliberate. It's not that they don't know or they are not urgent. I mean, they issue a certificate of urgency if they want to, which is of monetary value to lawmakers anyway, because certificates of urgency you get paid for that session. But then they do that when they see something urgent. So when they also think that this criminal justice system reviews of these laws are urgent, they would have done it. Or the GPPA Act, that is also stuck in the parliament. The anti-corruption bill is stuck in the parliament. All of those are stuck in the parliament. Or maybe the information, the access to information, that one is passed, but the process, the institute, the bill, the setting of the information commission, that one is not done. So a lot of things are happening, and so it is what it is. Yeah.
It's sad.
This,
Malika is sending us this cabinet meeting that
this
was.
is what I was talking about some they reference prison systems here, but it's not. There is very little information there. It's mostly about motor traffic thing, road accidents, and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's a shame. It's a shame. I don't know. I mean, where we should start. I mean, we're talking about learning lessons from this case, but when we
No,
look
we
at
start with the people. We start with
Mm.
the people. You see, politicians act when they do know our actions will be punished accordingly. But when you know that you can do anything in the Gambia and get away with it, you will do it. Yeah, in UK, for example, I mean, this particular lawmaker who was caught up watching pornography on his phone, what happened there?
yeah,
He faced consequences for it, right?
He
The prime
resigned,
minister
yes.
did some silly things, and during the COVID, he had a party. He faced consequences for it. So in America or in the UK or anywhere, I mean, Donald Trump, the impeachment proceedings, it didn't go because things system was so partitioned, but there was consequences for it. But he had, because he also had to sit and painfully watch him go on trial, sort of, so to speak, trial of some sort, impeachment proceedings of some sort. I mean, all those are accountability procedures that in a country that is in fact 10,000 years ahead of us is doing. Well, here, no one faces accountability. You can kill someone here and go to the market tomorrow. You just have to be a son of a rich guy, or some guy who can call the president, or some guy who is a party supporter. If you are even a party supporter here in this country, the party comes to your defense. No one has any sense of justice. You can go and steal, and if you are a Mandinka, you tell other people they are hating me because I'm a Mandinka, and you grown to Mandinkas, and Mandinka will defend you. And same thing you can do if you are if you are a Wolof, you can just steal people's money, and you go to the Wolofs and tell them, well, the Mandinkas, they hate me, they want to kill me. You can do the same thing if you are John, and people come to your defense. People don't even think. They come to you and they say, well, yeah, he's one of us. I mean, give him to us. If he's a thief, he's our thief. You know, I mean, that's the tragedy of the Gambian situation. So there's no clarity. People use emotions and they cloud other people's judgment, and in the process, accountability is killed. So it's such that everything goes by interest groups and by ethnicity and by friends and by, so there is no clarity. No one wants justice, and they think that is a system that you are doing it. No, no, no. When you do that, when you build a system where justice is not served, you are doing that to yourself, because at some point you will lose power. At some point you will not be in a position of privilege, and when that injustice will be perpetrated, you will be the casualty. That's what happened to Saddam Hussein. You think that fast track trial that happened in Iraq was sham, but they put him on the same guillotine he put people on and cut their heads. The same thing that happened to Gaddafi. It's the same system he created, the same system of injustice he created, that they put his head on that same system of injustice and they killed him. That's what happens when you build a system like that, a system where no one is safe. It comes back to haunt you. And that's the same thing the Gambian is doing, whether the Gambian in State House or the Gambian in the ministry or the Gambian on the street, collectively come together to build a system of injustice. And it will come back to
to
that
haunt.
very Gambian. Yeah, that's the thing. So the only thing that can save us is when the Gambian get to understand that consciousness, that this country wouldn't be safe until everyone is safe. No one is safe in the Gambia until everyone is safe.
Fatu, I don't know if you want to come in before I continue with my question.
Yeah, just to follow up on that accountability that Mustafa is talking about. I just wondered whether Mustafa has any thoughts around how we can keep individuals accountable and institutions accountable as well. Because if I hear everyone here on this call, we're talking about a system overhaul, especially around the criminal justice system. And my immediate question would have been, where do we start from? But I guess he spoke about accountability. So, how do we keep individuals accountable and institutions accountable?
It starts with the first thing starts with the
Ministry.
awareness
I
of the
mean,
people.
okay.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Sajo, go ahead.
No,
Right,
okay.
yeah.
Sajo, go
I
ahead.
have said, like to me, my frustration is, I think it's the ministry. When I said ministry, I mean MOJ. I think they have so much power and tool to set the country on the course correction, and the National Assembly. These two institutions, if they want to make any country right, they could. Now, I keep saying this, and then I haven't known much about the First Republic, but the Second Republic that I know, I keep asking myself, every attorney general that was appointed in Gambia, what could you come and tell people for, this is my biggest achievement when I was in office? I keep asking people, other than such a Nagi, like people who are stealing gold, meat, the petty theft. Those are all the cases we have. I have never seen an attorney general who get appointed and then within first 100 days in the office made a plan and a roadmap saying that my office is going to focus on public corruption, and I'm coming, I'm setting a tax force review, and then people would pay. Or come, I'm going after child abusers and child molesters. Especially if many folks remember during especially if many folks remember during VP Harris when she was nominated, there's a lot of critics that came after her when she was a prosecutor in San Francisco here where I'm at, and then when later she became an attorney general, that she was over aggressive in terms of prosecuting black people because he incarcerated them. There was those, but at least she has concern. And then you have attorney general when the opioid crisis came, who went after them and then sued drug manufacturers. Gambia, when is it the time that the attorney general come and then I said, this is my platform, I'm coming after environmental declaration, companies that are exploiting them, file charges, made them pay. Nothing is happening. And then if they fail, that's where National Assembly comes in. Bring these people and then show the evidence, do hearings, make the your findings public. Let the citizens get outraged as they are in this Grand Bob trial with the deficiencies in our justice system. At least if election come and then we still bury our head in the sand, we have no one to blame but the citizen. So I think, and then I have said this before, Gambia Attorney General in any country is the chief law enforcement officer. And then our constitution, we inherit this from the British. They advise, they can advise the government in area if the government want to go wrong. But the State House Council, that will be not necessarily sync with what we want as a citizen. Thereby, if he wants to make a policy or program, Attorney General could say, hey, I think this might run afoul with the law, and I'm not going to support that. They can duke it out in court, but at least there would be that detachment, even though it's a political appointment. But the problem is we keep going after people stealing mobile phones and then all these petty criminal, and then that doesn't solve anything. When the petty criminals would continue to rise, if those at the top of the food chain keep misusing our resources, the citizens would have to do something. They too would try to find an end to a mean. And then if they know that they are going to be part of a system of a criminal justice that's not fair to them, they would bribe police officers, they would bribe the magistrate, they would do things to make sure they also seek their freedoms to get out and then continue doing what they're doing, because there is no clear example or tone set at the top. If we see that, if we have an attorney general that comes out and then come after a military for abuse of economic resources, or criminal justice, start doing, no one is a sacred cow. I think that's where we need to make an inward look.
Thank you. Mustafa, you can go ahead with Fatu's question. I don't know if you still remember it.
Yeah, he was talking about what do we do. I think first it has to be, we have to begin with the consciousness of the people. The first, the education system that we have. The Gambian is not being trained to think. The Gambian is being trained to. We like to hero worship. Like that's our. We you know that's I guess that's what makes us vulnerable to sentiments. And the people will need to understand that they have created a government simply and squarely to solve their problems. Otherwise, there would be no need for a government. You appointed police to make sure when someone does it, so to make sure you are safe. When someone commits a crime and that that person gets arrested, society is safe. Criminals are taken to prison and that they are reformed and that they're brought back to the society so that society is safe. You appoint an army to make sure the country doesn't get attacked, everything works fine. You appoint a president to supervise every other institutions you have. Citizens need to understand that so that they know the person you appoint is not necessarily your father. Barrow is not your father. It's some guy you employ to make sure he does what needs to be done. And he must do that. That's his job. He either does that or get the hell out of that place. That's the job. So, and they apply that same understanding on every single Gambian, whether it's your own brother or it's your sister or your uncle. He has a task, and that task, you must know what that task is. If it's a police officer, you must know what the job of the police officer is, so that you can hold him to account. So that if someone comes to say, I am raped, you must know what that person's obligation is under the law. It is that rape must, you owe it to that person that that rape must be investigated, and that the criminal justice system must address that issue until they can confirm the veracity of the claims, so that you know this is how a country works and this is how it functions, and you understand your own role as a citizen within that greater scheme of things. That when an allegation is made, my role is X, Y, and Z. This is what Gambians need to understand, and their role and the role of a government. You see, but at this point that is confused. So it's that if your brother, if you are NPP or you UDP or you are a PDYs, you just facts are facts are your default setting is already there. So if it is if the truth doesn't, it's not a UDP truth, that is not your truth. It has to be an NPP truth before that is your truth. It has to be some Mandinka truth before that is your truth, or some Jola truth before that is your truth. It has to be some Manjago truth before that is your truth. That is how the Gambian. So it's like I watch, if you watch this Al Jazeera documentary Truth Illusion about American politics, and they show there was this survey that shows two photographs of Obama's inauguration and Donald Trump's inauguration. And Obama's inauguration, there were probably 10 times more people, but some people who support Trump, they show more people at Trump's inauguration than they show at Obama's inauguration. And that is the truth illusion. That is what the Gambian is. That is the sickness. It's a pandemic in the Gambia right now, and you cannot hold the government to account with people who cannot even believe in themselves. They cannot even believe their own eyes. Like they cannot even believe. They cannot even see the facts before them. You can't. That country cannot be a country. It cannot stand. You see. So that's the thing. I mean, even me, if I am in government right now and I am NPP, Barrow knows right now that for NPP, whatever he does, they are okay with that. What kind of a country is that? Like, how does that person, how can you appoint a shopkeeper and the shopkeeper is comfortable that if I mess up this money because he is my brother, so his default setting is that I am always right, or that he does not even have the consciousness to hold me to account, because in his mind his default setting is that I will always be right, not because of my conduct but because of who I am, whether my ethnicity or my social connections or my level, how deep my pocket is. So that's the tragedy. The Gambian is confused. It's ill-equipped to lead us to that reform that we want. And politicians, so long as that's the situation, they will continue to be. No one is dumb. I mean, if you see that there is no accountability for anything, why would you be accountable? So the first thing is the Gambian. The Gambian must value himself and realize that at some point I have to stand for myself. In this democracy, there is no such thing as this X, Y, and Z is it. I mean, Bao doesn't care about anybody; he cares about himself. I mean, he came with one car, and the last declaration he has 16 cars. No matter how well you are after him, you don't have 16 cars in 5 years, but he does have 16 cars. Like, how does that benefit you? I mean, the same thing goes for any political leader in the country. Like, what do they do that impacts on your life as an individual? Because in this business, life is an individual struggle. Like, so the Gambian must understand that, appreciate that this life is an individual struggle. I must build a country where my individual safety, my individual wealth, my individual protection will be assured, regardless of who is at the other side of the divide, whether the person is a millionaire or billionaire or whatever. Look at the American system. Flawed as it is, they are able to hold some very powerful people to account. I mean, someone just mentioned R. Kelly as an example. But they help powerful people. That's what happens when the system works. When the system works, you don't have to be worried about the fact that I'm a small man. There is no small man in a country that works. I mean, every system has flaws, but at least we get to know that justice will be served. See, look at it. I mean, just told you about mine too. At least Bob Keita happens to be known politically. And also, as a businessman, there were some stories that were done. But how about the small man who is in mile two? Nobody gets to hear about him. He is in remand for just smoking one weed, one box drum, and he is in mile two, and no one even gets to know he is there. What happens to that guy? And that guy is a victim of the system you and I built, and we continue to watch flourish. So that's the tragedy of our situation. For me, it's the Gambian. If the Gambian changes, the system will change.
Right, because we are the system, isn't it?
We are the system, and we unless if we put a price to whatever it is the political authorities do, we put a price to it. They will do it. I mean, when people flock to the courts and make sure the Bob Keita case proceeds, it did proceed. Whether that's for the wrong reason or for the right reason, where you stand on that is the matter. But it did proceed when people said it had to happen. In Senegal, when people took this and said Sonko had to be Sonko case, this is what had to happen, whether that's for the wrong reason, for the right reason, but it did happen, didn't it?
Yeah,
so
it did.
it all comes down to the people. If the people takes their life seriously and demand that this is the truth and this is what must happen, and they lose sight of the fact that there is no such thing as a UDP truth or an NPP truth or some PDI's truth. The truth is the truth, and you either stand to defend it.
I think Mustafa's
Is he
connection.
frozen or is it just on my side? He's
Yeah,
frozen, isn't he? Yeah.
frozen. Yeah.
I think Saja also wants to go, Mama. I don't know whether
Yeah.
we should be wrapping up now.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up. But Saja, what are your observations from the discussion that we're having? What can we learn from this case moving forward? Whilst we wait for Mustafa to come back. Okay, Maddie is here. Mr. Late. Hello,
Saja, can you
Saja.
hear us?
Okay, we can. Okay, Maddie is. You can bring in Maddie. Maddie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Yeah,
You,
if you can just
you
switch off.
get me?
Yeah, if you can just switch off whatever you're listening to, so you can hear us from here. Yeah, Mustafa, there, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. It's some internet connection. I think QCell may not have been very pleased with what I was saying. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I mean, and yeah. So I guess I have said everything I needed to say. Get frustrated sometimes, but it is
Definitely,
what it is.
it is.
Yeah.
We have Maddie here now. I think Sajo is coming, but Maddie, if we can just come in as well. Thank you for joining us. We understand that you were also just driving to get home as quickly as possible so you can join us. But what we're talking about is, of course, our criminal justice system, using the case study of Bob Keita's case, rape case at the moment at the courts. What are some of the observations that you have made around these issues? We are talking about whether the reforms that are at the National Assembly. I know maybe you're party to a lot of those. Just lying there, including even the Sentencing Act. I think there's something around sentencing there which includes more progressive sentencing like community service, etc., which are still at the National Assembly not being looked at. What have you seen or observed throughout this case that we're talking about, and how does that impact moving forward in terms of justice delivery in the Gambia for the future?
Okay. Just to warn you that I have a very bad internet. I don't know, these few days with these rains, it really disturbed my internet at home. Usually it's very good. So let me know if you're not hearing me. But it's great to be here. Sorry for coming this time because that was a period I was home. Um, I just picked some of the few words of Mustafa just recently, um, and I think he's laid out very well the state of affairs in this country. Um, so ultimately, I think the vast majority of Gambians are yet to define ourselves, to define what kind of Gambia we want. At the end of the day, that's how I see it. So that until now, the issues that really preoccupy people, the way we respond to issues, are so reactionary and so ad hoc, and a lot of it driven by ignorance, but also dishonesty, has affected our governance, our development, and every that we have, so that it is not just the justice system. But the justice system is very, very important because in a large way, you can determine the civilization, the level of civilization, the level of humanity or humanism of a society by the level of justice system that it has. That is how fair and open and just the justice system is. Because ultimately that is what is going to determine whether one is a small man, as Mustafa was saying, or a big man, or someone with a big name or not, will benefit or not from justice. And here, when we talk about justice, it's about your rights, it's about your property, it's about your freedom, all right? You and everyone else, so that everyone else would be in a society in which, so long as you have your life, you have your right, you have your property, you have your freedom, you have your security of person, it wouldn't be violated. And if it is violated, perpetrators will be brought to account. So for us as a nation, I think we have not worked really hard enough to create a just system, a just, fair, and open system, so that it is not just the justice system. Because as long when the justice system is faulty in some way or in any way, so it affects all other systems because everything is about justice. Because it's about rights to education, to healthcare, to good roads, to public goods and services. These are all just part of the justice system. All right, and so it is not just what obtains in the courts. And so what is unfolding for me in this Bob Keita case, it clearly confirms to me one more time how ill-prepared, unprepared, unwilling, unable we are as a society to create a just system, such that the concern, the anger, the dissatisfaction, the frustration that is showing on all sides in this matter is something that we have shown since 2017. If it didn't show since 1994, since 1970, when we gained independence, to make sure we create a proper system. But we have failed to do so. So now we have a situation where there's so much injustice, and this is fused with other traditions, cultural, social, religious, such that we are still unable and unwilling to realize that as a republic, we should create a situation in this country where everyone, we are all equal, everyone has rights and freedoms and need to be protected. So we have to address certain beliefs, certain practices, such that those practices and beliefs do not become obstacles in terms of, in achieving our freedom and ensuring justice. And one of them is patriarchy, right? And in this Bob Keita case, you can clearly see the deep-seated nature of patriarchy in our society. As we saw immediately when Tufa testified before the TRRC, the reaction that has come against her, so that really, for me, all Gambians, if we had created that kind of a society, a just society, um, violations happen, and it's up to the individual to claim who has violated him or her. And if an individual, points to an individual, another individual as the violator, our law creates or has the principle of presumption of innocence. But that person, both the victim and the perpetrator, are subjected to a due process. And that due process is what needs to be our concern, to make sure it is going fairly, justly, and quickly, reasonably quickly, so that at the end of the day, we can determine the nature of that offense, the statement of the victim and the status of the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator. So if that doesn't concern us, but we get drawn into narratives based on, like I said, these other social, cultural kind of systems, we that we have right now. And at the end of the day, what I see everyone saying, there's sort of logic. People are using a lot of logic, of course, a lot of disinformation. And so, which in the final analysis is not both in the interest of the victim and the interest of the alleged perpetrator. And in the long run, what is going to happen, we are just going to maintain the unjust system, social, cultural, political system in this country, in which, in future, for example, I think this case, either way it goes.
It's unfortunate we lost Madi there. It looks like we can't find his connection. Mustafa, there's a question here from one of the listeners asking, what do you think the impact has been on this case in terms of the coverage from social media? How has that impacted the case of like this? Because a lot of people, some are saying it's brought to light what is happening in terms of the delay in justice, but it has also created incitement that is maybe unfortunate, but it's also created divisions and hatred within a very tragic situation that we all need to look at. You are mute, Mustafa.
Sorry. The
Yeah.
social media is a good platform. It's a good platform in that it gives the people, it democratizes information sharing. It takes it just not just away from the journalist, but that also means that also comes with a certain kind of shortfalls in that the people who share information on social media are not necessarily journalists. That means the quality of information are not the same. The nature of the processing of the information and the nature of how they filter the information they process, they get and process are different, and the nature of the dissemination are also different, such that you have platforms that just share what they give, what they are given. So you send something, they would say our sources say this. But critical journalism teaches us that you verify every critical information that you receive before you share it. Because in journalism, I wouldn't say so that you don't become victim of disinformation and misinformation and all that stuff. So those are social media. It's a vital tool, but it can also be used for as it happened in this case for disinformation and serious disinformation. I was talking to you about a TikTok video ad, so I saw online, and they were saying a lot of things about this case that are not actually true, like totally far away from the case. But then people consume those things because I saw a lot of likes. So, and you told over 3,000 likes, if I can recall. So that teaches you that a lot of people saw that. And those people, you can't tell if they did or did not believe it. So those are some of the issues that social media did to the case. And yeah, and which is good or bad, good and bad at the same time. Yeah.
Definitely. Saja, I don't know if you're back. If you want to jump in on some of the issues that you were trying to address before you took a break. Hello, Saja. You are mute. We can't hear you. Okay, I think Mustafa, we can go on and talk about um, rape from the perspective of the victims. When you do investigations, for example, you've done about, I think, 3 investigations that I saw on Malagan. Have you done any follow-up in terms of, I know most of them, most of the cases have not been prosecuted in court. What does that do to the morale of the victims, and what does that mean for other victims who are also maybe observing?
You see, that is the reason why I talked about clarity and the need for justice and for everybody to have interest in justice. And that's one thing also, this particular case. I was having a conversation with a colleague and this case came up. The case that you guys are referencing right now, the Bob Keita case came up, and someone told me, the unintended casualty, the unintended outcome of this is that it will be difficult now for someone to also come out and say, I am raped, or I have, considering the potentials there are for you to face a lot of backlash. Um, and you can disagree, of course, this is a matter of opinion, but that is something that could happen. Um, um, the situation, our failure to do thorough investigations, not just about gender-based violence-related cases, but particularly about gender-based violence-related cases, not only do they embolden the perpetrator, but it also creates a society where injustice becomes entrenched, such that no one is safe. And that no one, that environment of on that unsafe environment you created. It's where your sister and your mother lives. It's where your auntie lives. It's where, so the consequences for this kind of thing is very grave. That is why, as a society, we must have clarity. We must know where the line is. Yes, injustice cannot be allowed to continue, and such that so someone at mile two cannot be continue to be languishing there if there is no evidence indicting the person. That's clear. Someone should not be presumed guilty until proven innocent. That is also clear. So those are things that are clear. But what is also clear is anybody who is facing allegation of rape must be cleared, must clear himself. He must be taken to court and prosecuted accordingly. If acquitted based on evidence, then the person goes back to his life. So those are things that so we should separate everything safe and protected to the process. But the morale is not just for this. It's not just for poor investigators, but even the reactions in this case and how we seen this case comes out being covered, and everything that happened thereafter, it's going to have an impact on someone coming out in the future to say I'm raped. I've seen, because I've had friends who have had allegations, who have told me, confided in me issues before, but they don't have the courage to come out. And we've had cases like that. I mean, in the past, you have people who are raped, and in fact, the society discourages them to say they were raped, and makes it look like being raped is be ashamed of being raped. And so the perpetrator does not have to be ashamed. It's, you can seal his identity. That's what happens. And when that happens, people no longer have the courage to come out and tell their stories. And so, if anything, that's the society we are creating right
Which is very unfortunate. Sajo, I don't know if you're there to talk about this.
now.
Hello, Sajo. Okay, Fatu, are you around so we can wrap up?
It
We're
looks
over
like
the
it's
time.
frozen for some time.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
I
the,
am. I
okay.
am, Mama. Yes. One,
Okay.
one,
Do you
one
want
last
us to wrap
question
up?
for
Mhm.
Mustafa and Sajo, if Sajo is around. It's about the protests that we are seeing in the past weeks or days. The mass mobilization of individuals trying to show solidarity to Bob, but also questioning or holding accountable the criminal justice system. I just wanted to ask Mustafa if this is something that he would encourage in a democracy.
Uh, Not quite. You see, uh, the the problem is that is the lack of clarity I am talking about. You see, there are some people who are on the street. They are not on the street to say rape is fine. Bob did not commit rape. There are some who are on the street to say Bob has been in mile two for 2 years. The state has no evidence apparently against him, and he's been languishing there with presumption of guilt until proven innocent. And that is injustice. And they're saying that is injustice. But within the greater scheme of things, then you have also some with misguided notions such as free Bob. But free Bob within a context of he did not do it. There is a tiny minority you talk to, you get that sense. He did not do it. But there is also a good part, because you get to talk to a lot of people. There's also a good part who are clear that, of course, justice needs to take its rightful course, but it's also not right to lock someone up for 2 years without the person have, you know. So you see, I mean, a lot of these things happen. But then the bottom line is, like I was saying, the the it is the right. Speedy trial is the right of both perpetrator and a victim, alleged perpetrator and a victim. Speedy trial. And a fair justice system is a right for both of them as well. A judiciary that is also functioning is a right that should be accorded to both of them. So in this case, I think the delay has not been helpful to either sides of the divide. That is, if there is a division. As far as I am concerned, I do not think anybody who has a good sense of justice should be a party. I think that the position of everybody should be that Bob should, the idea of not bailing people and presuming they are guilty is wrong. It shouldn't happen. The case should have been thoroughly investigated because Mama also deserves justice. And if Bob is found guilty, there is no such thing as free Bob. When Bob is found guilty, it should be the justice should take its rightful course. If he is found innocent, he goes home. You see, and he should not be in prison because he is alleged of something. For me, I am against that totally. So those are my person. But you see, then it becomes a protest, and when protest happens now, uh, it becomes a matter of sentiment, and then people go, and now it metamorphoses and it keeps changing, and now it's free Bob. So yeah, I mean, I can't blame. I don't know. I can't read the mind of people who are doing it, but I don't know. I mean, eventually, also, I mean, the unintended consequences, like I said, would be that you will get to a point when someone will be scared to come out. So indirectly or directly, we are unintentionally creating an unsafe environment for our girl child, or for our sisters, or for our mothers, or for our aunties. Unintentionally, that's what we are doing. I mean, that is unintended consequences, maybe. But we have to generally sit down and think about this because Bob also deserves justice, much as Mama does, and Zainab and the child. So I think what we need to do is to stop the sonko, and everybody has a clear head, and then we know this is what we want. This is what justice is. Because right now everybody's thought is clouded with sentiment, such that no longer no one any longer sees what justice is about and what justice should be in this case. Yeah.
Definitely. Sajo, I don't want to know if you want to come in there so we can wrap up afterwards on the street protests. What does that do, and what's the implication of that as well on justice delivery, but also on a perspective or other victims who are also observing?
Uh, it depends on the purpose of the protest. Now, if the protest is, hey, we have seen what has been reported. This case took 2 years, and then it was adjourned several times for flimsy to no good cause reason, and we want the justice in a fair and efficient manner. Any feature, victim of gender and sexual based violence. But in as much as, from my own personal view, in as much as, judiciary may fumble, or even police prosecutors may fumble, we cannot change the conversation to, hey, judiciary, their inefficiency, or the police for, whether lack of investigation or, lack of evidence, if that's the case, their mishap on the victim. I think that's where we draw the line. You cannot translate that or explain that as to, hey, the claim might be not credible, and then that could actually put a chilling effect to any future individual that might have or wanted to come out if there is, a sexual violence issue, because they would think the country, the community does not believe them because our judiciary or the police may have failed us. So that's how I see it. I think, whether, that's what's going to happen, I doubt it, because even in advanced countries, whenever people are divided over issues, whether it's abortion, whether it's rape, whether it's secularism, people would take a position and then stand with it, regardless of, we can all have a middle ground, but people actually would believe what they want to believe. There would be people who would go out there and then say drop the charges because we believe that what you are doing, you are persecuting the individual. We do not take at face value of whatever complaint the victim has alleged. And then there are people inherently who would say no, there is a victim, and then I'm going to support that victim regardless. I'm going to take her word at face value until proven otherwise. So that's going to happen. But I think what has been failing us, it's the our own prosecutors and then the police. Cases of this magnitude, you don't need to give everything to the public, but once investigations are completed, or they are midway, I expect from our law enforcement to do press conferences and then let us know that, hey, we have investigated this thing, and then at this time we have collected a lot of physical evidence without actually mentioning them. We have a lot of physical evidence, or there's a lot of biological evidence here, or testimonial evidence, and then the case is at the justice. And then a case that attract this kind of attention, the justice ministry or the prosecutor should always make inform the public. Look, the case is ongoing. Our witnesses have testified. We have collected adequate evidence, and then that's a way of reassuring other victims or people who already appear to have harm, that you can come out. And then that is what's not happening. And then I keep hearing this in Gambia, even journalists. Oh, the case is currently in front of the court, we cannot talk about it. I was like, says who? Says who? The case is currently in front of the court, we cannot talk about it. I was like, says who? Says who was sold to us from time of immemorial, telling us that you can't. These are all common law rules back in 16th century feudalism, where lawyers, you are not even allowed to advertise your service. It should be by word of mouth. And then these unwritten rules in England developed, and then we inherited their system, and we continue to peddle the same thing when they in fact change theirs. Because even in the United States, it's common law system. We drive it from the birth, but we change it. People challenge those laws where lawyers could not advertise. They intentionally advertise, and then case went to Supreme Court. You can't do that. And then in Gambia, you have a freedom of expression, that you could, no court could put a chilling effect. Now, I'm not saying you say a statement that would be considered rebuke or, somehow enhance the jury. Yes, even in the US, there are cases where there would be a gag order for people not to talk about, or prosecutors or defense talk about the case, because they don't want to influence future juries. Maybe because a crime happened, a serious crime, and then everyone is charged. And then the judge, either party might move for an immediate gag order for any of the party to speak about, some of the evidence collected. That way, you don't influence the jury that are going to be selected, because it's going to make it difficult to empanel a jury. Gambia, we don't have a jury system. We have a trial by the bench. You are a trained judge for 7 years before you sit on that bench. If you cannot separate facts and emotion from each other, you don't deserve to sit on that bench. I don't care whatever people are talking on media, because you have the training, the expertise to be able to separate the law from emotion. No one can, whether people would say it's going to be guilty, that's opinion. People could make their opinion. But what media people could speak about, and then what media people could speak about, and then the citizens, is about informed facts. Throughout this hearing, I hear a lot of things. People would come. I see people would claim there is no evidence. In this case, they are stolen. And then I'm sitting there, I was like, I mean, I know it's Gambia, but are we really that nuts to, like to file charges, and then there is nothing? You are telling me, like, because Gambia, unlike advanced world, like it's just like the UK. Let me bring this. You cannot convict anyone on rape without corroboration. So if I'm a prosecutor, a police brought a case to me, and then the only thing you got is what the victim told you, and I do not meet my corroboration requirement, why would I file those charges? Because I'm setting myself for failure. So why would you do that? That's how it's done in England, and then they change it in '94 in the Criminal Justice Act. They remove that. So for me as a prosecutor, I'm a prosecutor. So this is what I'm thinking. If a case file comes to me and I have the victim statement, the first thing I would ask, okay, where is the birth certificate, for instance? I know the child is a minor. Okay, there is a child. At least I know I have something here. But at least, how do I corroborate the identity of the accused? At least I know what the witness told me. And then the witness is telling me, is there any other evidence that could, suggest identity? So most of the issues like even DNA would have been requested from the word go, when it was filed. You could give a courtesy to defense counsel and be like, hey, would your client submit to a voluntary DNA? Some defense would do, or be like, hell no, we don't want to do it. As a prosecutor, in this case, this specific case, from the facts we know, you have enough under the law to request that. You have probable cause to request DNA. Why haven't you done that? So those are some of the questions that, I have concerns with. But the problem is, we all, speak about these issues, and then we don't know what are the facts that are applied before the court. The only thing I know of so far, the state has tendered 8 exhibits. My question is, you put 8 witnesses on stand to testify, except for the doctor. What are they saying? Because they cannot all come and say, oh, the victim told me this is what happened, and then that's just cumulative evidence. No sane judge would allow that. So there must be a testimony they are giving that's completely different from that. And evidence is not just physical. And then I can tell you, in the real world, especially sexual violence cases, it's hard to convict, but half the time, unless there's DNA, which happened in the 90s here, most of the cases, even murder cases, people are convicted on strong circumstantial evidence. That's the system we have. It's imperfect, but evidence could be shown. So while people who understand this, we make statement, and then inside the public, make it look like, during Jambia, you just go and then arrest people without anything, and then you make up evidence. Even Jambia's time, all the people that are convicted in court, there is some evidence. You could say it's fraudulent, but at least they bring in evidence. So to me, what I think, what would have been just to the citizens of the Gambia is like if journalists who attend this hearing could let the public know, today, 8 witnesses testified, and these are their testimonies. Or when the case started, this is the initial evidence the state filed. These are public record. This is a public trial, but no one is telling us that. And that's why you have so much divide in Gambia, and justifiably so. That's why a lot of people are enraged, not understanding why would you put a young man in remand for 2 years if there is no evidence, because no one knows what's actually happening. The defense is not doing information about what on. The prosecutions are not doing, press release to inform the public and then control their emotional expectation. And then the police never did that. And I think because of all their failures, now, the accused in this case is paying for that injustice because our system failed. Knows he's under 16 when she gave birth. So even suggest the word alleged victim is just insane. We know she's under 16. She gave the birth. There is a real victim here. So that too also, the system failed. And then the young child, I don't want to come there because I know from legally the way I looked at it, those things are completely separated. They are just apple and oranges. But as a Gambian, as a citizen, watching out, you would know, the young child that passed to was not given the proper care. Because cases like this, I see people would blame social welfare. Unless there is allegation of child endangerment at home, why would social welfare get involved? But still, the prosecution's office, a case like this magnitude, if you are prosecuting, you would be in contact with the complainant in this case, and then the actual child in this instance, you would want to be involved and know if they are getting proper medication, if everything is fine. And then if you believe that this minor who gave birth to a child is not in a position or capacity to take care of that, I think the prosecutors have a duty to involve social welfare at the time. But if that was not done, social welfare are not magician to know that, hey, a child is in danger at this specific home. There has to be a system and a process for people to know. F1, that's how people get involved in issues. So it is unfortunate, but I think it is the system that has failed the entire parties in all these proceeding. And the alleged boyfriend, an individual who is not a party to the crime. And then I looked at it from my point of view, Gambia Bar Association. You issued a court order on an individual who is not named as a complainant, not a criminal, and then asked that his biological sample be extracted when this is not a paternity suit. That's where people can actually argue that, hey, this is not a paternity suit, DNA is not required. He is the guy who has those rights. But for any other person, this has nothing to do with paternity. That's just evidence. And then it has nothing to do with it. And then in any way, even the most advanced justice would be required. But he is the most unfortunate victim of, if we are going to talk about, abuse of process, is the alleged boyfriend. He has nothing to do with the case right now because he's not legally charged or anything. And then yet still they drag him to RVH and then extract. There he has an argument for invasion of privacy, not anyone else. I think that's the unfortunate incident here.
Thank you very much, Saja. I think that brings us to a good wrap. I'm going to ask one more question, Mama, if you will allow me, and then we can wrap up. And I'm going to put Saja on a hot on the spot right now to
Uh-huh.
ask, as a legal professional, Saja, and given the fact that this case has the prosecution has been delayed, and given the fact that the crime that this individual has been accused of is it's what do you call it in the legal terms? Felony? Is that what you call it? Um, or
No, it's a
capital
capital.
offense?
It's a
Yeah,
capital offense.
capital offense. So which means it's not bailable. If you
It's a
were the
felony.
judge, yeah,
Yes.
felony. If you were the judge presiding over this case, would you be granting Bob a bail right now?
Well, I read it differently. I know, don't get me wrong, there's clear law, CPC 100, that says that, crimes that attract life in prison are non-bailable offenses. We know that it's a black letter statutes in our book. And then the Court of Appeal has, upheld that. Just because you do not necessarily agree with the law, as a jurist, you must accept them in as much as it's painful. Now, the way the laws is in the Gambia, I think any judge, your hands would be tied to issue that because you would be issuing an illegal order. Now, I hold a different view. On the Gambian constitution, where they call, fundamental rights 17 to 35, high courts have power to interpret. Because the problem, this is the problem with Gambia. Unlike the United States, we used to have the same thing, like the Brits, where constitutional interpretations, Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, and then our trial courts, could not interpret provisions of the Constitution. So you keep having this mini trial, and then the 97 Constitution actually set a little bit of compromise. It says, except court has original right. If this were the US, where, from the trial level, judges, we have a review system, you could interpret any provision of the Constitution subject to appeal if you're wrong. In Gambia, I think the way the law stands right now, a judge could not issue, bail in this case. That's just the law, and it's black letter law, unless Supreme Court comes and then overturn Court of Appeal. But for this specific case, I believe there's a provision in our Constitution, and then it's still a tenuous argument. But if you looked at 19.5, what it says, anyone who is arrested under Section 23, meaning, they believe you've committed a crime, or, you're about to commit a crime, and then you are charged. The operative language in, 19.5 says that if you are not tried within a reasonable time, you must be released without condition. So the question becomes, in this specific case, for someone who is detained for 2 years, and then the court keep adjoining the trial, but it's no fault of the state, because we made it clear that it's not the prosecution who is doing this argument. Can a defense file a motion to have their client released, or even a habeas petition arguing that, look, my client is not
Okay.
innocent for this specific case under Section 19? But that has not been done. So you cannot fault the judge or the state for not doing. Like I said, if I walk into court, it's not my job to do the other parts to work for them. You bring the motions, and then I'll argue it if you don't bring that. But if you don't bring it, as it is in Gambia, the judge would say, hey, you apply for bail, I can give you bail. before the judge gave bail, thinking that, under, Henry Gabriel, the President Supreme Court issued, they thought that by analogy you could give bail, and then the trial court in this case issued bail, thinking that, hey, you can actually issue bail to someone who is charged with a capital offense. And then Court of Appeal says that no, you can't, because that, decision from Supreme Court is limited to individual who have already been convicted, and then they are appealing their conviction. They are entitled to bail. So the Court of Appeal, has a narrow reading of the Supreme Court decision. They distinguish it. So because the rulings and then the decisions of Court of Appeal is binding on this High Court, you cannot issue bail just on a strict bail application, unless you bring in another legal, unique argument why your client should be released. That's how I see it.
Thank you. I think that about just wraps it up nicely. Mustafa, we would just like to give you an opportunity just to come in and tell us your observations, the lessons moving forward from what we have seen, both from the Bob Keita case and also the wider implications in terms of how we move forward as a country, as a community, the lessons that need to be learned, both from the Justice Department, but ourselves as individuals, our conduct on social media, etc. What are your observations on all of this? What are the lessons that you think we should be drawing from all of this moving forward?
I think first of all, I think the coverage, the way the matter was in the media, I think that the media should have done much better job in terms of creating a fact sheet dispassionately, without taking sides, creating a fact sheet on the process that had happened, the evidence that is before the court, and dispassionately present those facts in the public domain, so that facts would rule and guide over sentiments. But the media space becomes so entangled, and that the coverage of the case became a subject matter for social media influencers. And so when that happened, it became a matter of who has the largest audience. So fact became a casualty. And I suppose with it also sentiment arose and controlled the narrative. I would have loved to see media coverage next time, probably a more thorough journalism, because the society cannot survive, cannot thrive without good journalism. The same way, information, it's what human being needs to decide what to do with his life. So it's like the software of a human being. When you give poor information to an individual, it does the same damage like a virus does to a computer. Because it determines a poor thinking and a poor action. And that's what it leads to. And so the media ultimately guide this mess we are in right now. And I had hoped that it would have been better. And the second thing is that the citizenry must take matters of governance seriously, and know that, this society, every citizen is an activist. I mean, in this country, people are fond of, they don't even read news, by the way. I mean, regardless of this investigative journalism we do, you come to realize that probably the highest read stories we have is 10,000. Go and read about some dispute between
two slave
I would say, dispute between maybe UDP leaders in Dabo and Mama Kande. If you write about that, you're going to have 50,000 reads in just maybe 1 hour, 2 hours. But read about life and death issue, and then you get 2,000 reads. And that's what they do. And when something happens, they come and say, where are activists, where are journalists, as if you are not an activist. This is your country, this is your life, this government is your government. Why are you asking for an activist or a journalist? Who are you? Don't you have a voice? Aren't you a human being? Don't you have dignity? I mean, stand for yourself. You see, so people need to go through a certain kind of acculturation that tells them that this is what it's supposed to be done. This is how we build and keep a republic functioning. And so the third thing is the state. But you can't get to the third thing if the people do not push, because politicians just do what they know people will tolerate. So that's the thing. If people push for reform, we will have reform. If people push for no reform, we will have no reform. And so that's it. I think that's the way forward. First the media, but the media and the people. The media leads the revolution, and the people follow. Yeah, but the thinking has to also be regarding the journalists, and the journalists will have to have not have because in this day and age we are at a different generation. I mean, you were talking about me awards. I've become a celebrity, and unfortunately, I mean, this is not something that this is something that can be very toxic as well. Um, you know, People who had passed before us, maybe John Kunda, Nafis Batara, or Sam SARS, they don't get to have this kind of fame. Nobody gets to know them. And at some point, when you do one or two stories and you become too famous and you become some kind of, you know, life becomes very comfortable and, you know, well, let me not just talk too much. But in the end, I think media needs a great deal of reform, really. It does. And I think we are all included in that. Yeah, but it's the media and the people. Yeah, I would leave it at that.
Thank you. Sajo, your final thoughts around the same issues, the media coverage, the social media exposure, um, looking at it from a law standpoint, and from lessons that can be drawn for the future. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think media should do. I don't want to say they are not doing much, but for this case, uh, if I have to do a legal analysis, I haven't learned anything from the media. And then, other than Keck's unrelenting report about the case, what I hear, what happened. No one knows what exactly the facts are in this case. Like a case like this magnitude, I would expect GRTS, like our national media and all these media houses having reporters. People should have access to this complaint. These are public documents. That should be there. At least let us know what the complaint allege, and what section, in fact, is this accused charge under. And then what initial, evidence did the state tender? Because you're in court, these things will come out. But media houses also, does. I'm not asking them to be Mr. Dabo, but at least to make it as a news. Let's say what Keksane is doing, spending his own time reporting what he has observed, and then you make that as a story on rape from a media house. That's like, maybe at least to inform the citizen that something is happening. But from a legal standpoint, for legal scholars, if you want to realize, like, what the hell does that mean? So that's why, for me, regardless of the noise coming from anywhere, when I hear people getting outraged, there is no evidence or they're fishing for evidence, I don't blame them, because they don't know. And then, whether testimony has been taken, they don't know, what evidence has been adduced, since the beginning of the trial. And then they don't know, if the adjournment, the state is a party. And then they don't know Are you holding the other side, defense side, to account? Are they agreeing or tacitly agreeing with this adjournment? Do they protest about it? This would strike a balance about public expectation. We have not seen that. People just, these questions would have made a lot of answers. And as the case developed, many people might have to, eat their words again, because if something comes to light, because still now, from my point of view, I don't see the facts. I don't know. And then thirdly, our system is what is holding all of us hostage. Like, I'm not in Gambia, and then I'm a lawyer by profession, and I struggle to get in because I, have an active desire. I wanted to know what's happening there. But sometimes when I saw some things, I want to be outraged. Then I looked at the way our laws are. What they are doing is perfectly normal. It's perfectly fine. It might be insane. It might be immoral, but it's legal. So if citizens know these things, the conversation would shift from either persecuting the victims here or other people, and then focus on holding our lawmakers accountable to change our laws. In this process, I have seen people defame, per se defamation, where, in any other world, they would be bankrupt in a minute. But defaming people, nothing is happening. And then that's my frustration. I think, and then our law enforcement officers, they need to be well trained to understand issues, even judges and then our prosecutors, that it is okay to give information to people. If you don't feed them accurate information, they are going to make up stuff. And then I have seen that happen, even people who are educated going on saying things that don't make sense, and it keep inciting a lot of violence in the population. People get enraged. So we have dropped the ball here, and I hope in future, issues or cases, journalists would show interest to bring the facts, and then if courts are refusing them to have access, or even the prosecutors, we have now access to information bill. Get involved. And I know, I understand we might have a different, thinking about how they see things, this whole idea in Gambia that, oh, the case is in court, you cannot speak about it, it's contemptuous, it's yada, yada, yada. But at least they can come and then talk to people like the program you guys did. That's the first time I actually hear something that I know it syncs with the law. When JSO was actually, stating what the law is, some of the things that could be done, and then even all these things, like even the case of DNA. I was enraged the trial is told, but so what? Our law says prosecutors could bring any competent evidence at any time of the trial. Are they being an ass about it, bringing it at the 11th hour? Yes. But are they legally covered? Yes. So what's the beef? So I don't get it. And then judges having, like we are in 1800, people come and then make oral argument for hours, wasting time. If there's an issue, they are lawyers. Let them brief it. Tell them, counsel, if you have a problem, brief it. I want it tomorrow on my desk, and then I'll make a ruling. It would expedite the process. But we still comes as if, we're in a district tribunal. You come and then yell as this is a political debate. Mustafa, sing his holy gospel until 3 hours. We all clap. Oh my God, this is, and then I come sing my holy gospel. Everybody are, oh my God, today is, and then what kind of nonsense is that? These are lawyers. They are like, we have this saying in law school here, or even you stand at the court and then you start saying all these things. I would look, review, pleadings of lawyers in Gambia. You come, this is an invasion of my privacy. You can't, and then the judge will look at you and are like, according to who? The Holy Gospel of Sadio? Like, why should I care because you said it? Why? Why should I give a damn about what you just said? Like, this is the case law. This is why your hands are tied. Just like how the Court of Appeal, right now, if you can, that's what we expect. And then the moment we focus on the profession and then do what is required of a competent, attorney in all side, a lot of these delays will, we wouldn't see it in the system. Sometimes the problem is us, the lawyers, and then not necessarily with how the system is. Hopefully things change. And then this movement would make, hopefully people, take the conversation to other level and then not stop here, and then make their NAMs accountable, and then have people to review our laws. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Sajo. Thank you, Mustafa, as well. I don't know if you want to come in there, Fatu, any closing remarks, and then we can wrap it up here, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Mama. I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, Sajo and Mustafa, and of course, Mahdi, who couldn't stay longer. Just to say that this session, this sitting has been really productive. I think you guys have actually enlightened us in this sitting personally, I would say. And I would go back and watch this and reflect on or take stock of what's been discussed to guide my advocacy in supporting women and girls. I just also want to flag that we would have in the coming days more topics, more similar topics of this nature. We would be hearing from victim and perpetrator perspective. We would be bringing in service providers to give their own perspective on Linger Post. So do keep following. And Mama, just to say thank you to all the viewers or those who would be watching later on. I know we've been here for nearly 3 hours, but I think it has been worth the time. And to give a shout out to those in the background who have been supporting us and working with us to make sure that we have series of workshops like this to really create awareness, to create a safe platform where we could share as professionals, as individuals. So just to say a massive thank you to the entire team and to our panelists and to yourself, Mama. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And just to say, I've shared the Malagan website. I always read their stories, and I think Gambia, we have to get into a culture of reading, because that's the only way that we will be informed. If we do not read, we're not going to know what is happening in that country. And so it's good to read, especially on investigative journalism, etc. And I think you can't go wrong with that site. And also just to thank our panelists, Madi, of course, who was also here briefly, but also Sajo and Mustafa for this insightful conversation. We have really all learned a lot. And I think, as you said, this will actually also advise us in the way that we advocate, especially online, etc. So we thank both of our panelists for this insightful discussion. We also thank the team at the back, led by our able Jabate. And everybody at the back. I don't want to name any names before we miss anybody, but thank you to everybody that is also supporting and ensuring that we elevate and have a conversation where, again, we add value to the discussions that are being held at the moment. And of course, thank you, my co-host Fatu, for really again doing a wonderful job. And of course, thank everybody that's also watching us. From start to now, everybody that has commented, that has also shared some of their views, etc. We thank all of you for your engagement and for keeping it here and watching us as we navigate these very sometimes difficult conversations that we're having. So we're thanking everybody. And of course, like you said, we're having another series of discussions or workshops looking at rape and sexual offenses from a victim point of view, and also from an alleged perpetrator point of view, and bringing those things together to see how best we can strike a balance, which I think is very important in the work that we're doing. So we thank everybody once again, and hopefully we'll be seeing you very soon to continue these discussions by hopefully the next few days as well. So we will share the programs as we have them. Thank you, everybody. Amy, AJ, Ajisan Jaika, thank you so much. Suhu Mariam, we appreciate all of you. We appreciate your comments. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. Thank you, everybody.